Every single day, there is someone out there dumber than you that is landing your cybersecurity dream job. And they're working in a job that is more interesting and more lucrative than you will ever experience, so long as you continue to move the goalposts on yourself with certifications. I'm gonna be fully transparent with you guys. This used to be me when I first started out. You see, before I became a senior level cybersecurity professional with over a decade of experience working for multiple Fortune 500 companies and the US government, I was frequently stuck in what I would call analysis paralysis. And it wasn't until I learned the points that I'm going to share with you in this video that I was actually able to overcome my imposter syndrome and make real progress towards my goals. So if you're in a similar situation, you might have thoughts like you're thinking that you're not smart enough, but in reality, the opposite is true. You may have heard the term too dumb to fail, but perhaps you're too smart to succeed. And how do I know all this? Well, many dumb people are in this field all the time. And if you don't believe me, enter the field, then come back and message me. What you're going to realize is that these are going to be the vast majority of your peers. It's going to be your coworkers, your bosses, etc. And the reality is you don't need to know as much as you think you do in order to get a job. This was something that really shocked me all throughout my career. Even at my mid-level roles and things like that, I was surrounded by people that were average to below average intelligence. Even though, it's like you look at the job description and you see all these advanced things listed on there, you feel like an imposter because, they recommended you for the job, but you don't even meet half the requirements. And you go in thinking that everyone must be so advanced, they must be so skilled, right? Well, no, actually, you go in and no one has OSCP, even though it was listed on there. Everyone's like completely new. There's like one guy that's been in there for a long time, but he's kind of complacent. And, you're left kind of scratching your head. You're like, what's going on here? Like, they told me it was oversaturated. They told me it was so difficult. And then you go in, you look around, and this is the reality. I've told this story a couple times on my channel, but when I first got into cybersecurity, I was really shocked because I was having an interview with the director and he was asking me what I did to learn cyber. And I told him I was doing OWASP WebGoat, which was like one of the vulnerable machines, a hackable website, and a few other things. And I was like, I wish I could have said more. And he just paused for a second. He was like, wow, that's more experience than most people on this team have. I thought it was a joke. I really did think he was like joking with me. I almost thought, should I laugh? Should I not laugh? I was like in my head about that. Well, I didn't laugh, and it turns out that was the correct choice because when I joined the team, I found out it was not a joke. Everyone on the team was completely green. I'm talking like 13 pen testers or ethical hackers, essentially. Only 2 other people had even heard of Kali Linux before. Everyone else was so new, they didn't even know what that was. That is the reality at a lot of these companies. And knowing Kali Linux is not a measure of someone's like intelligence level, but if you interact with them a little bit, you'll get an idea. You'll get a feel for it. And if you are in cybersecurity and you had a similar experience, comment down below. I can't be the only one. I mean, I've talked to a lot of coworkers at this point, and so I know I'm not the only one. Here's the thing. I think there's a lot of overthinking that happens, right? Because you're running all these calculations in your head, part of the imposter syndrome, right? Consider this. In the time that it takes you to run all that advanced algebra and all those calculations in your head, only to determine that, oh, well, shoot, I'm not yet good enough, right? Well, meanwhile, the dumb guy is already about 6 steps ahead of you because, well, he never stopped to run those calculations in his head in the first place. Don't get me wrong, though, with all this. I do love certifications. They're great, especially the hands-on ones, but I think most people use them completely wrong. It's really best to dive into them once you're already in the field. And I would say any more than a couple when you're getting started is you're going to start running into the diminishing returns territory. I do recommend my students to pursue 1 or 2 just to show that they are being proactive in their learning. A lot of people, they have like this huge stack of like 5 certs. They got this long cert path that they're going for. The reason for that goes back to imposter syndrome, right? It's like, I totally get it. Like, I used to think like this. I remember I had documents. I had like Google documents and Excel sheets of like all these certs that I was going to get. I had notes on my phone. I'm going to get all these certs in this order and all this stuff. Now, why does that happen? I think you have so much imposter syndrome about not being good enough that you try to architect in your head some kind of magical plan that if I had this stack of proof, if I had all of these advanced certifications, well, then there's no way I wouldn't be elite. There's no way I wouldn't be underprepared. I would definitely get a job if I had like all these certs, if I had OSCP, if I had CPTS and PNPT and like all these things. You come up with this long laundry list. You have like this 5 technical cert pathway that you're going to go down just to prove that if I do this, there's no possible way I couldn't get a job and I wouldn't be prepared, right? Literally, I think what goes through a lot of people's minds, but let's take that to task, right? Let's actually sit down and probably do something that when you were running the calculations in your head, maybe you overlooked this. Let's look at the numbers here. How long is this actually going to take? And what's going to be the time and monetary costs associated with it? Let's actually break that down. All right, so what I have on screen here, I like to call the 5 certification timeline. This is basically a mock-up of what you might have in your head if you're architecting a plan like this. Like, I'm going to get all these certifications, and then I will know that I'm good enough. I'll know that I'm ready to get into cybersecurity without a doubt, right? So I just picked some 5 sample ones, kind of ones that I've heard people say a lot, like out of the people that I've talked to that are kind of struggling with this issue of imposter syndrome and things like that. So let's say they want to start off with a more basic certification. And by the way, if you're looking at these certs and you don't know what any of them are, maybe you're super new, don't worry about it because that's not so much important, but just to give you an idea of this is legitimately some people's paths. This is what it would look like from a time perspective. We'll start on the time side. We'll look at the monetary costs in a second, but let's say we start with the PJPT, the Practical Junior Penetration Tester cert. This is a good entry-level hands-on certification. These are all hands-on certs. Let's say someone's trying to get in the offensive side of cyber. So basically, this research was conducted based on the average amount of time it would take a complete beginner to go through and get the certification. And so let's say 1 to 2 months for a PJPT, and then the CBBH, which is the bug bounty one from Hack the Box, that will be 2 to 3 months. They go for the PNPT next. That would be 3 to 5 months. And this one is from TCM Security. And then we go back on the Hack the Box side for the CPTS. That'll be 4 to 6 months. And then OSCP from Offensive Security, the gold standard one, that would be 6 to 9 months, let's say. It can fluctuate as well. The reason that we say ideal case, keep this in mind, this is the ideal case, because what this is assuming, and a lot of people will see this on paper and say, oh, that's not too bad, I can do that. Let's stop for a minute and think about the fact that this assumes that you are going for all these certs back to back to back to back. You're literally, imagine this, you're literally the David Goggins of cybersecurity. Like, this means that you were going hard at this stuff day in and day out. This means that, like, you're basically, like, saying no to your friends, saying no to your social life for how long? 1.5 to 2 years. You're going for a cert, you're getting the cert, and immediately starting on the next one. Right, the 1.5 is like you could overlap some of these technically, and that would bring it down to 1.5. But if you don't, then it's going to be a full 2 years. And by the way, let's not overlook another aspect of the ideal case. It means that you pass all these certs on your first attempt. So it means you go through and you are flawless. You don't fail a single cert, and you also don't take a single break anywhere ever for any reason whatsoever. You are literally, if you can do this, you are quite literally what I would call the David Goggins of cybersecurity. Now let's go ahead and look at it from a cost perspective. And the way that I'm breaking down the cost is it's going to be the lab cost, since these are hands-on certifications, plus the exam cost if it's a separate expense. So looking at PJPT and CBBH, you got 230, 200. These ones are lower cost, a little bit more entry-level friendly. And then you go to slightly more expensive ones, things like PNPT, CPTS, 460, 400, and then the big gold standard one, OSCP, and I put on the price for Learn 1, right? Because I don't want to look at the cheapest offering they have, because if we're assuming that the timeline is going to be 6 to 9 months, if you get anything longer than 3 months, you have to actually sign up for the Learn 1 subscription. So you have to go for the entire year, which is going to be $27.49. So if we add all of that up, the total expense for getting all these certifications is going to stand at $4,039. So you're looking north of $4,000, which can be a very significant expense for a lot of people. It's a pretty big number, right? And so that is one immediate thing that I think a lot of people don't really factor in when they're doing all these calculations in their head. They put a lot of effort and thought into why they're not good enough, why they're not qualified, but these are things that they tend to overlook. You know, I used to be there, right? You know, it looks at a glance like, oh yeah, 230, 200, that's not too much, but the costs, they add up. And once again, you better hope you pass all those on the first try, or, you know, newsflash, you're going to be paying even more on the certifications when you have to do the retakes or maybe even extend your lab time. So definitely keep that factor in mind when we're talking about the ideal case as well.